month of Fructidor, year 6, from the 18th of August to the 17th of September, 1798. Complaints of Switzerland and Italy. My motion of order for the Cisalpine Republic. Reflections upon that motion. A constitution once violated no longer exists in principle. Potential oaths. False application of the word aristocrat. The powers. The Treaty of Campo Formio had stipulated that there should not be any change made in Italy, but with general consent. Had we faithfully kept to that condition? Since that treaty, we had entered Turin, of which we occupied the fortress. The king, our ally, had retired to Sardinia. He had only the shadow of authority left to him upon the continent. Our Republican principles had raised the whole of Piedmont. If we had not excited them, we had at least profited by them without the concurrence of Austria. That power had, therefore, a just cause to complain. At all times, the invasion of a kingdom is a legitimate motive for the renewal of a war. If history is not impartial, it is no longer anything but a source of error. We certainly were not to oppose a neighboring people imitating our example, but the introduction of our troops into their fortresses was committing a decided act of hostility against Austria, and it was with an ill grace that we afterwards complained of the obstacles thrown in the way of the negotiations of Rastatt. Neither did the taking possession of Mulhausen afford any proofs in favor of our moderation. The Directory had recently united them to France. As for the Roman government, it could not justify its culpable indolence in the fanatical insurrection which cost the life of the brave General Dufault, and in which the life of the intrepid ambassador Joseph Bonaparte had been menaced and his residence basely violated. We were justly entitled to a signal vengeance, but was there absolutely no other reparation possible than the overthrow of the temporal authority of the Pope? That temporal authority is useful, necessary, indispensable for the independent exercise of the spiritual authority of the See of Rome over all of the Catholics in the universe. The immense majority of the French people professing the Roman Catholic religion could not fail lamenting from the bottom of their hearts the desolation of the Holy See. Still greater reason had Austria to resent, as a Catholic and neighboring power, the new infraction of the Treaty of Campo Formio. The Kingdom of Naples had never dissembled its hatred against France, but the establishment of the Roman Republic furnished it with a plausible pretext. Thus, Naples and Austria were provoked by the changes that had been made in Italy. Russia, discontented, threatened. Paul I had taken the Order of Malta under his protection, and we did nothing to retard or ward off the attacks of this new enemy. The Directory kept the citizen Talleyrand in Paris, instead of sending him to Constantinople, according to the promise made to my brother. If the mission of that skillful diplomatist had only succeeded in retarding for some weeks the hostilities of the port, the result would have been important. But directly upon the departure of the fleet, the Directory had forgotten its promise. England was fully sensible of all the evils that the French expedition might cause. The newspapers were filled with alarming conjectures. Was it towards Egypt or towards India that our army was directed? In all cases, it threatened the British interests with the greatest dangers. About the same time, 1,500 of our brave fellows under General Humbert had landed in Ireland, where the discontented population hastened to join our standard. What motives for our great enemies to redouble their efforts and to endeavor to renew a coalition with the kings of the continent? To attack us was to defend itself. Nothing, therefore, was neglected. Every day they approached towards their object at St. Petersburg and Vienna. Berlin alone still resisted. The illustrious Sieyès had accepted that embassy, where his influence fortunately balanced the solicitations of the Count de Cobenzl and the Prince Repnin. Sieyès absents himself willingly from Paris. He had never approved of the Constitution of the year 3, which appeared to him to be insufficient. His foresight had preceded by 2 years the opinion of everybody. He had refused to enter the directory, and almost universal regrets had followed him to Berlin, the only capital in which, since his presence there, our directory had triumphed. Such was the state of the powers. If the strange politics of our government did nothing to quiet our enemies, it had in requital turned with impetuosity against our own allies. A rage for directorial propagandism had taken possession of our chiefs. They wanted to reduce everything to their own resemblance. Their commissaries, their acts of authority, their ambassadors carried trouble into the neighboring republics, which, scarcely born, were certainly not in want of those interior convulsions. The allied republics, the nearest to us, the Helvetic Republic, was so much exasperated that her minister plenipotentiary Zeltner addressed to the directory the following note, a piece remarkable for its bitter censure, very slightly covered with some diplomatic compliments. That note, in act of real accusation against the French directory, after having enumerated the injuries of Switzerland, ended thus: the consequences are much to be dreaded of a conduct so revolting towards a people who never suffer themselves to be diverted by pleasure nor intimidated by force, and who are only to be gained by kindness. It is very impolitic, instead of endeavoring to become better acquainted with the character of the people, the maintaining towards them the same conduct as if they possessed the happy lightness with which the French adopt novelties, or the apathy of the Bavarians, or the docile pliability of the Italians. These irritable and courageous people are zealously attached to their religion, their pure democracy, and ancient morals. Whatever bears a stamp of infidelity or oppression fills them with bitterness and indignation. When there is no longer anything to be lost, when animated by despair, they become capable of every excess, and Helvetica may become the theater of scenes more horrible than those of La Vendée.